Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all to the Set Them Free's UN Commission on the Status of Women 65th session panel, Combating All Forms of Violence Against Women, Turkey case. I am Cemre Ülker, the co-founder of Set Them Free and UN representative of the JWF. Today we have a very important agenda to cover with prominent experts and human rights activists. Before we move on, I would like to briefly introduce Set Them Free. We are a civil initiative raising awareness on the violation of women's and children's rights in Turkey. Set Them Free advocates for the human rights of women who are unlawfully jailed as political prisoners. We also work on social empowerment programs for the enforced migrants of women and children in Greece who had to escape their homeland, Turkey, due to the ruling government's oppressive policies on dissidents. In this panel session, we will be talking about the unprecedented rise against dissident women in Turkey, minority rights, gender-based violations. We will cover the effect of decree laws in Turkey, and being a woman in this context of all the atmosphere of fear, preventing women to live in dignity. But before we proceed further, as we will be speaking about Turkey today, I would like to mention that yesterday was another dark day that will be remembered in the history of Turkish democracy. Turkish parliament stripped the opposition, the People's Democratic Party, HDP's member of parliament seat, Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu's impunity, and upheld his prison sentence as he retweeted a public news story on his social media. Gergerlioğlu is a hero in the eyes of victims in Turkey who are exposed to all sorts of human rights violations. We know that this is an attempt to silence the human rights defenders. Gergerlioğlu bravely raised a very well public awareness on the violation of strip search in prisons. He stood up for the rights of arbitrarily arrested mothers, did all his best to defend the rights of children in the prisons. Today is the day that we have to show our support for him. Stand in solidarity with him. Gergerlioğlu is a chosen member of parliament, and I just want to say that he is never alone. Going back to our topic today, especially since the last decade, Turkey has experienced a dramatic increase in violence against women in all forms of physical, emotional, economic, and social distress. Domestic violence and especially femicide has risen to the highest numbers over the last years. Dissident women, especially in civil society, media, judiciary, who are promoting human rights and raising awareness on the oppressive policies, have been marginalized in different forms. Members of parliaments have been arbitrarily jailed, and many pioneer women human rights defenders are discriminated against based on their political opinion, culture, and ethnicity. I want to note that we are live in YouTube as well. So any of your comments and questions are more than welcome, as we will open the floor for Q&As at the end of the panel. So as with this brief introduction session, I would like to move on with our speakers today. We will be first hearing from Holly Mackay. She is a foreign policy expert and war crimes investigator. She was an international affairs war journalist for Fox News Digital for over 14 years, where she focused on warfare, terrorism, and crimes against humanity. Holly has worked on the front lines of several major war zones and covered humanitarian and diplomatic crises in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, Turkey, Yemen, and many other areas. She has spent considerable time embedded with US and foreign troops, conducted extensive interviews with the survivors of torture, sex slavery, and forced child jihadists, trainings, refugees, and of course, internally displaced people to communicate the complexities of such catastrophic war crimes on local populations. Holly's columns have additionally been been featured in the Wall Street Journal, and her writings referenced in many mainstream publications and academic journals. She has also won numerous foreign press and humanitarian awards as well. Holly, thank you so much for your presence today. It's a pleasure to have you on board, and the floor is yours. We're looking forward for your remarks. I believe you're muted, so if you can unmute your microphone.
Sorry, I'm a tech dinosaur. There you go. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. So I think the approach that I've liked to take as a journalist and someone who has worked in a lot of conflict areas is, I think, when especially audiences in America can become very distant from statistics. And when I was researching for this panel today, I looked at the UN and UN Women. They obviously have very sobering statistics about the situation in Turkey. 4 of 10 women in Turkey are exposed to physical or sexual violence. 48% of girls in Turkey are married before 18 and exposed to physical violence. And then, of course, you have the issue which I'm focusing on today, which is women and babies in jail. And those numbers, I believe, vary from hundreds to many, many thousands, and at least 700 children behind bars with their mothers. And what I wanted to do today, instead of, I guess, being here and giving you a whole bunch of different numbers, is really take the micro issues and tell you about some of the people that I've met over the years in covering this particular issue. And so that I think that's always sort of a more poignant way of painting a bigger picture of a situation. So excuse me while I read, and I apologize in advance if I mess up my Turkish pronunciation. So this excerpt comes from early in 2018, in some time that I spent in Turkey and also researching this issue. It was a snowy January morning in Istanbul last year when Ayse, a 32-year-old primary school teacher and mother of 2, kissed the kids goodbye at school and headed home. She didn't make it to her front door before she was surrounded by 7 policemen, accused of membership in a terrorist organization, handcuffed and taken away. 2 months after being jailed, Ayse was joined behind bars by her youngest son, Ali, who was just 4 years old. For another 4 months, she said, their lives unfolded like a horror movie. Built to hold 10 people, Ayse said, her cell was packed with 23 detainees. She remembers babies unable to get vaccines and burning themselves with hot tea. She remembers, too, the traumatic cries at night. Loud music blared through our ward every morning. Every morning I would wake up scared with my son, she told me. The ward was a very dangerous place for children. Our bunks were iron. One baby there was learning to walk and hit his head badly. Other children were screaming. It was an incredibly difficult time. The case of Ayse and Ali is hardly unique. Based on monitoring government decrees and other reports from official sources, by the end of August 2017, advocacy groups had highlighted some 668 cases of children under the age of 6 being held in jails with their mothers. Turkey's Justice Ministry provided a somewhat lower figure, stating that a total of 560 children under the age of 6 were being held in Turkish prisons along with their mothers. But whatever the number of prisoners, prisons are no place for children in any civilized country, said Dr. Alan Mendoza, executive director of the British-based foreign policy think tank, Henry Jackson Society. He called the policy of jailing mothers and children without a charge a travesty of justice that will have lasting effects on the lives of innocent children. Other critics of Turkey's policy noted that the imprisoned women and children were victims of guilt by association. What is striking about detained women since the failed coup is that some of them are simply wives or children of suspects, but not suspects themselves. This amounts to collective punishment, said Merve, a research analyst for the Foundation of the Defense of Democracies. According to the World Prison Brief, in October last year, women comprised of 4.4% of Turkey's prison population. And mind you, that was 2017, so it's significantly higher now. Cam, a 34-year-old university teacher, at the time, at the time of her arrest was in October 2016, was held for 2 months for investing, as thousands of other Turks have, in Bank Aisha. She was kept in a cell with her 7-month-old son and 2 other babies, where they were prohibited from crawling on the floor. Toys were also prohibited, she said, and at times they could not access clean water. We were all treated like terrorists. We were isolated, Cam told me. We were all humiliated. I don't know what was worse, to have my baby in the prison or to have my other son, who was 11, outside the prison. When I saw him, he was changing. And at the time, I looked into a lot of case studies and pictures, and they showed babies still on jail floors with no play areas or facilities, women with chunks of hair ripped from their scalp in alleged prison mistreatment, and dozens of infants smiling before being whisked away to detention, where many are believed to remain. And I'll just give you the story of one other woman that I spoke to, Nuhayet, who was 27, and at the time she was a housewife expecting twins. And she was arrested in 2016 after boarding a bus. She was detained and charged with terrorist membership because she had Bylock on her phone. At the time, she had a miscarriage behind bars. At the time, she said was a result of the stress and the malnourishment that she received. Nuhayet lost her dreams, one of the legal activists who was working told me at the time. And now she is suffering immense psychological problems. She barely talks. Her twins never got to live. And then there are other stories, like another woman, Filzez, who was taken in a wheelchair just 8 hours after giving birth at a maternity hospital and was taken back to jail. The police came for me at 3 a.m. They said I was a terrorist because someone in a dormitory room from 2008 gave them my name. And with that, she was taken away to a cell, but she considers herself one of the lucky ones. She was released after a week due to her severe asthma and heart condition, and she quickly boarded a smuggler's boat and is now living abroad in Europe as a refugee. Obviously, the situation remains a huge cause for concern for many human rights groups. The situation seems to center on an inability to reconcile what the justice system in Turkey is doing. And it's unfathomable to me to see this still happening now. And just the number of young children who are spending their early years with their mum behind bars. Many of them have been there without a conviction. And that is one of the most troubling things to me. Another situation that I wanted to bring up from my experience is obviously the Kurdish situation. I spent a lot of time with different Kurdish groups in Iraq and in Syria. And I kind of just wanted to highlight a little bit about what some of their fears were as well. So this is an excerpt from a group of Kurdish women in Syria who were very concerned soon after, I guess, the US troops pulled out and were very concerned about a takeover by the Turkish military. When the threat of an attack looms, scores of Kurdish women in every major township have carved out a canton of Rojava in northeastern Syria, and they stand shoulder to shoulder. Amid a region ravaged by years of conflict and ISIS incursions, their formation is what they call their very own human shield, comprised of women who stand there like a protest camp at the border. A possible military incursion by Turkey was at least temporarily averted when the US said they would stay longer. But the second that was ripped away, the women all got together. Everyone knows the political situation against us. Everyone knows Turkey wants to destroy the fruits of our revolution, said one from the Euphrates region. So we have a human shield in protest. We are civil people, and every household here has lost someone in the fight against ISIS. Every household has experienced so much pain, driven out as refugees, cities left in ruins, but with love for our homeland and for all the people in Kurdistan, we have come together. And she went on to explain how the women stand together as an act of defiance, without weapons, without any protest, and just simply to say that they're fighting for their culture and what they believe in. And that fear is something that's still very much embedded in the women that I speak to from the region at large. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight that as a part of the work that I do as well. And I know that the situation for the Kurdish population in Turkey is extremely difficult, especially with the news yesterday as well. So I kind of just wanted to bring those two different issues to light with my remarks today. And feel free to ask me any further questions about those issues.
Holly, thank you so much, really from the depth of my heart, because we follow on the news on what's going on in Turkey, violence against women and whatsoever, but it was very critical to hear the real life stories of dissident women and Kurdish women from the lens of your investigative journalism. So I really appreciate you sharing your interviews, the stories of these women. And I know that you recently launched your book, I believe last year, Only Cry for the Living. Would you want to very briefly talk about this book and how we can purchase it, or any other details that you want to share?
Absolutely. So I spent a lot of time between 2014 and the end of 2018 covering ISIS or the Daesh in the Middle East. A majority of time was in Iraq, but also in Syria and the broader region as well. And so, you know, again, it goes back to, I wanted to put something together to really explain to people the situation from the ground and really tell those human stories that we often don't always see in the news. And we tend to get very distanced by the numbers and the statistics, and they can feel a very sanitized kind of look at war. And so I wanted to try to really show people what it's like to live on the ground, and from every perspective. So we have the perspectives of the US military, Iraqi military, the Syrians, the women, the Yazidis, even a lot of terrorists themselves, to try to understand how they think and why they do what they do, and have pledged allegiance to this horrific group. So it's kind of just telling the stories, and hopefully people will get, I guess, a little bit more of an intimate picture of daily life and what it is like to be in a situation that, you know, most of us will hopefully never have to ever understand.
Yeah, definitely. I already purchased mine, so
and it's on Amazon too. Yeah. So sorry.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And any feedbacks for Holly? Any questions? Please write in the chat box, and I believe we're gonna come back to you in the Q&A session as well. So I appreciate your participation.
Cemre, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are muted, so what you said we couldn't hear. Sorry.
That's fine. I started by introducing Acun. I'm sorry for the technical issue, but I'll come back to her introduction once again. Thank you, Hafsa, for the heads up. Acun Karadağ has graduated from Ankara University's Faculty of Language, History and Geography Department, majoring in history. She worked in the military archive, translating the Independence Wars Ottoman correspondence to Turkish for 1 year. She resigned after working in Atatürk's mausoleum archives for 2.5 years. Acun started teaching in 1996, and she says those were her happiest days after her childhood. She served as a teacher for 20 years and as a public officer for 25 years until her dismissal by the decree law on 29 October 2016. She is living with her daughter, who studies at college. Acun has led the Yüksel opposition for 4 years, a resistance movement started by unlawfully dismissed academics by the decree law. She is keeping her activism and being a voice for everyone by her articles to raise awareness on human rights violations taking place in Turkey. And Acun, thank you so much for being us today. She has been a really influential name throughout this process of crackdown of democracy in Turkey. She mobilized civil society and stood up for the victims from all walks of lives. It is really a great pleasure to host her today in our platform. And this morning we learned that she was also acquitted from one of her cases. They were set free, so congratulations on that good news as well. Acun will deliver her remarks in Turkish and I'll do my best to translate her remarks. Acun Hanım, tekrardan hoş geldiniz. Sizi platformumuzda konuk etmek bizi gerçekten çok memnun etti. Bu sabah aldığınız güzel haber için de vesileyle tekrardan sizi tebrik etmek isterim. Umarım tüm arkadaşlarınız, tüm siyasi tutuklular en kısa zamanda aynı şekilde beraat ederler. Siz arzu ettiğiniz zaman başlayabilirsiniz konuşmanıza. Ben de ara ara tercüme ediyor olacağım. Buyurun. Belki sizin de mikrofonunuz kapalı olabilir. Bazen unutabiliyoruz açmayı. İsterseniz açıp tekrar başlayın.
Merhaba.
Hi everyone.
Panele konuşmacı olarak katılan ve bizleri izleyecek olan tüm insan hakları gönüllülerini, aktivistlerini ve paneli düzenleyenleri sevgiyle selamlıyorum.
I welcome all the human rights volunteers, activists who are watching us today, as well as the panelists and the organizers with my heartfelt regards.
Türkiye'de bir gecede isimleri listelerde yayınlanarak işine son verdik dedikleri 140 bin kamu emekçisinden yalnızca biriyim. 2016 Kasım ayından beri Ankara Yüksel Caddesi'nde işimizi geri istiyoruz eylemlerini yürütenlerdenim. Eyleme okulumun karşı kaldırımında öğrencilerime ve öğretmen arkadaşlarıma ben haklıyım diye seslenerek başladım.
I am only one of the 140,000 public workers who were dismissed over one night in Turkey as their names were announced in public lists. I am among those who have been keeping up with the protests at Ankara Yüksel Street since 2016 November, calling out as we want our jobs back. I started this protest right across my school by raising my voice as I said I am right to my fellow students and colleagues.
14 Kasım 2016'dan beri yüzlerce kez gözaltına alındım. Hakkımda onlarca dava açıldı. AKP iktidarı bu haklı direnişi defalarca terörize etti. İllegal örgütlerle bağlantılı göstermeye çalışarak kamuoyu desteğini kesmeye ve bizi yalnızlaştırmaya çabaladı. Bizler o kadar haklı bir yerden, o kadar meşru bir şekilde direndik ki bizi yalnızlaştıramadı, halkla bağımızı koparamadı. Son çare olarak 5. kez evimi basarak önceden ayarladıkları savcı ve hakimleri vasıtasıyla tüm direnişçileri ve beni tutuklattı.
I have been detained for hundreds of times since 14 November 2016. There have been countless of cases filed accusing me. The current ruling party AKP has terrorized this rightful protest over and over again. They tried to isolate us by initiating this protest with the illegal organizations to attempt to cut off the public support. However, we resisted with fully rightful claims by all means of legitimate ways. They did not succeed to leave us alone, could not cut off our connection with the public. Their last attempt was to invade my house for the 5th time by the pre-assigned prosecutors, judges, and they arrested me along with the other protesters.
Ağustos 2020 tarihinden 27 Ocak 2021 tarihine kadar tutuklu kaldım. Şimdi dışarıdayım ama biliyoruz ki kapalı hapishaneden açık hapishaneye geçiş yaptım. AKP iktidarı dışarıdaki hayatı da açık hapishaneye çevirmiş durumda. Hiçbir demokratik hak kullanımına izin vermemekte, örgütlenme, bir arada yaşama, dayanışma adına yaptığımız her etkinliği kontrolü altındaki polis gücüyle engellemek peşinde. İktidarın demokratik alana bu saldırılarında kadınlar, çocuklar, yaşlılar dahil tüm halk kesimleri hedef alınmaktadır.
I was imprisoned from August 2020 to 27 January 2021. I am out now, but we know that I just got transferred from a closed prison to an open doors prison. The AKP government has transformed the life as if it's an open doors jail. It does not allow any democratic rights to be practiced. They are trying to oppress all sorts of activities we organize to live together, to suppress any act that we hold to support each other by means through police forces. Women, children, all kinds of citizens, including the elderly, are targeted during the attacks of the regime at the democratic arena.
Ne oluyor? Polis neler yapıyor? Bunlardan bahsetmek isterim. 4 yıllık sokak eylemlerimizde başımıza gelenleri anlatırsam nasıl bir saldırı altında olduğumuzu daha iyi anlatabilirim. 4 yıl önce eyleme üzerinde işimi, ekmeğimi, öğrencilerimi geri istiyorum yazan bir dövizle başladım. Bu anayasal bir haktı, pasif bir eylemdi. 4 yıldır eylemin biçiminde bir değişiklik olmadığı halde iktidar sürekli farklı biçimlerde anayasayı çiğneyerek eylemi engellemek istedi. Yargılanamayacaklarından emin yüzlerce polisin sürekli saldırısına uğradık.
What is happening? What are police forces doing? I would like to talk about these, and I would describe them better if I elaborated on what we went through at the street protests for the last 4 years, what we came under. I started the protest 4 years ago with a poster that said, I want my job, my bread, my students back. This was a constitutional right. It was a passive stand. For the last 4 years, nothing has changed in the form of this protest, but the government continued to prevent the protests in different ways by violating the constitution. We faced hundreds of police's attacked who were sure that they would not be charged for their violent actions.
Eylemin 25. günü kalbime pil takıldı. Bir ay istirahatten sonra tekrar sokağa çıktım. Eyleme devam ettim. 4 kronik hastalığım olduğunu bildikleri halde defalarca kimyasal gaz sıkıldı ağzımın içine kadar. Defalarca hedef gösterilerek plastik mermi sıkıldı vücuduma. Bacaklarım defalarca plastik mermi izlerinden mosmor oldu.
I had a cardiac pacemaker surgery at the 25th day of the protests. After a month of resting, I was in the street again to continue. Even though it was known that I had 4 chronic diseases, they used chemical gas again and again, even into my mouth. They pointed me as a target and shot rubber bullets on my body countless times. My legs were bruised all around many times.
Şu anda ters kelepçe ve yerlerde yüzlerce kez kollarından tutularak sürüklemeleri nedeniyle 2 kolumu da kullanmakta zorlanıyorum. Parmaklarımda uyuşma var. Çantamı bile taşımakta zorlanıyorum. Tutuklandıktan sonra tansiyon hastalığım ilerledi. Yükselen tansiyonumu kontrol altına alabilmek için ikinci bir ilaç kullanmaya başladım.
I'm having a very hard time to use both of my arms right now because of the rear handcuffing and that I was dragged on with my arms. My fingers are numb. I am even having difficulties to carry my own bag. My high blood pressure got even worse after I was imprisoned. I had to start using an additional pill to regulate it.
Sıkılan gazlar yüzünden astım teşhisi konuldu. Gözaltılar sırasında kabadayak, gözaltı arabasına atma, fırlatma, küfür, hakaret, aşağılama, taciz gibi birçok polis saldırısına maruz bırakıldım. Beni taciz eden polis hakkında karakola şikayette bulundum. 2017 yılından beri şikayetim işleme konulmadı ama polis beni şikayet ettiğinde açılan davada beni taciz eden polise tacizci, sapık dediğim için kadın bir hakim tarafından polise hakaret suçlamasıyla 5.000 lira para cezası ödemeye mahkum edildim. Yani tacizcime 5.000 lira ödemem isteniyor.
I was diagnosed with asthma as a result of the gas that was exposed. I was subjected to all sorts of ill treatments in the detention by police, such as beatings, being thrown into the detention car, swearing, defamation, and sexual assault. I filed a case against the police who harassed me, but since 2019, it was not processed. When the police put a case against me, I was charged to pay a fine of 5,000 Turkish liras, by a woman prosecutor because I called that police as harasser psycho. So I was demanded to pay my harasser 5,000 liras.
Ayrıca devletin kurumlarını aşağılamaktan ceza verildi. 4 kez siyasi şube nezaretinde günlerce süren gözaltılarda kaldım. Tutuklandığında polis ve gardiyanlar tarafından 2 kez çırılçıplak soyularak onursuz bir aramaya tabi tutuldum.
Additionally, I was charged with insulting the government institutions. I was detained for days in the political branch detention center 4 times. When I was arrested, I was humiliated twice as I was subjected to a strip search all naked by the police and guardians.
Direniş arkadaşlarımdan Nazan Bozkurt'un göz kemiği ona yumruk atan bir polis tarafından kırıldı. Nazan kör olma tehlikesiyle karşılaştı. Platin elmacık kemiği takılarak kör olması engellendi.
My protester friend Nazan Bozkurt's eye bone was cracked as a result of police punching her. Nazan faced with the threat of being blind. It was prevented by putting a platin eye bone.
Nuriye Gülmen'in burnu kırıldı, Mehmet Dersulu'nun ayak kemiği çatladı, Alev Şahin'in parmağını kırdılar. Erdoğan Can Polat'ın direniş destekçisi yazar Turgut Türksoy'un kaburgaları kırıldı. Direnişe destek veren Zeynel Danacı'nın kolu polis tarafından kameralar önünde kırıldı. Gülnaz Bozkurt'u saçlarından sürükleyerek gözaltına alan polis saçlarını kökünden koparttı ve Gülnaz bir süre saçları kel dolaştı.
Nuriye Gülmen's nose was broken. Mehmet Dersulu's feet was fractured. Alev Şahin's finger was broken. Erdoğan Can Polat and Turgut Türksoy, who is a writer, their ribs were broken. Zeynel Danacız, who supported the protests, his arm was broken by the police in front of the cameras. The police dragged Gülnaz Bozkurt from her hair to detain her, and it was pulled off completely from the scalp, so Gülnaz was bald for some time.
4 yıllık direnişimizde her gün, hatta günde 2 kez polislerin bu saldırılarıyla karşılaştık. Amaçları hukuka aykırı bir biçimde bizi işimizden attıkları, KHK hukuksuzluğunu dile getirmemizi ve KHK'ları işlemez hale getirmemizi engellemekti. Konuşmamızı istemiyorlardı. Bu polisleri şikayetlerimize valilik soruşturma izni vermedi hiçbir zaman. Kameralarla tespit edilmiş, reddedemeyecekleri birkaç saldırı şikayetimiz için polislere dava açıldı. Bu davalarda da polislerin meslek hayatlarını etkilemeyecek göstermelik cezalar verildi. Onlar da para cezasına çevrilerek ertelendi.
During our protests for 4 years, we were subjected to such police assaults at least once a day, sometimes even twice. Their purpose was to silence the individuals whom were unlawfully dismissed from their jobs. They did not want us to speak up. The office of the government never allowed our complaint cases about these policies to be put into action. There were a couple cases that were taken to court as the police's violations were proven by the cameras, so they could not deny it. In these cases, charging police was sort of a showcase, which did not affect their career at all, and they could even postpone the penalties as they were converted into fines.
Bunca işkence ve kötü muameleye neden katlandınız diye sorabilirsiniz. Buna verilecek ilk cevabım şudur. Bizler direnişe 15 Temmuz 2016 darbe girişiminden sonra AKP'nin 20 Temmuz sivil darbesi ve OHAL sürecinde başladık. Biz sokakta bağıra bağıra işimizi geri istiyoruz dediğimizde demokratik kitle örgütleri üyesi olduğumuz sendikalarla susmuştu, sessizdi. Herkes korkuyla bir kenara çekilmişti. Düşündük ki biz de susarsak herkes susar ve bu iktidar Türkiye halklarını ezer geçer. Bu nedenle susmadık.
You could ask why I put up with such torture and ill treatment. Here is my first answer. We started our protests after the coup attempt of 15 July 2016 with the civil coup of the AKP on 20 July following the state of emergency. When we shouted in the streets claiming our jobs back, the democratic organizations, the unions that we were members of, they were all silenced. They were moved over to the side as a result of the fear. We thought that if we would also stay silent, then everyone would everyone, and this government would sweep away the peoples and the diverse communities of Turkey. Therefore, we did not keep quiet.
Şimdi ne kadar doğru davrandığımızı daha iyi anlıyoruz. Evet, çok bedel ödedik, ödüyoruz ama iktidara da bedel ödetiyoruz. Biz direnirken iktidar bizi ezemeyeceğini, halk da susmaması gerektiğini anladı. Artık herkes konuşmaya başladı. Hapishaneler, gençler, kadınlar susmuyor.
Now we better understand how right our actions were. Yes, we paid a high price, still paying, but also making the government pay off as well. While we resisted, the government understood that they will not be able to crush us. The society understood that it should not stay silent. Now everyone started to speak up. Imprisoned individuals, young people, women are not staying silent.
Bu bedellere rağmen neden direnişe devam ettiğimize ikinci cevabım da şu olacak. Haklı olmak öyle bir güçtür ki kimse onu bastıramamalı, bir daha haksızlık yapmaya hiç kimse cesaret edememeli. Çünkü faşizmin cesareti kitlelerinin suskunluğundan kaynaklanır, kimseye bu cesareti vermeyeceğiz.
My second answer will be this. Being right is such a powerful state that it should never be oppressed, so that no one would ever attempt to violate anyone's rights again. Because massive silence gives a rise to the fascism courage. We will not give this incentive to anyone.
Hakkımızı kimseye yedirmeyeceğiz. Siyasi iktidar servetine servet katsın diye bizler yoksullaşmayacak, köle olmayacağız. Bu ilkelerimizi her mecrada anlatacağız. Bugün hala tutuklu olan direnişçiler Alev Şahin, Nazan Bozkurt, Mehmet Dersulu ve Nuriye Gülmen hapiste bile susmuyorlar. Bizler neden dışarıda susalım?
We will not give away our rights. We will not be slaves. We will not get poor just because the political power would get richer and richer. We will disseminate our principles at every platform. Today, even the imprisoned protesters, Alev Şahin, Nazan Bozkurt, Mehmet Dersulu, Nuriye Gülmen are not staying silent. Why would we stay silent outside?
Direnenler bedel ödüyor da sokağa çıkmayan, susarsam dikkat çekmezsem bu süreci atlatırım diyenler, direniş kültürüne yabancı olup devletin bu yüzüyle ilk defa karşılaşan, şaşkınlık içinde olayları bir mantık düzlemine oturtmaya çalışanlar bedel ödemiyorlar mı? Ödüyorlar tabii ki.
The ones who resist are paying a price of, but the ones who do not protest at the street, who think that they will let go of this process by staying silent, the ones who are not familiar with this culture of resistance and facing this side of government for the very first time, the ones who are shocked and still trying to look for a reasonable explanation are not paying a price, they of course do.
Hamile kadınlar, bebekli kadınlar gözaltına alınıyor. Düşmanınıza yapmayacağınız bir şey oluyor. Bebeği ve sağlığına dair kaygılarla baş etmeye çalışan henüz doğum yapmış kadınların hastane odası kapısında polisler anneyi gözaltına almak için bekliyor. 70-80 yaşındaki insanlar, görme ve duyma engelliler gözaltına alınıyor, tutuklanıyor.
Pregnant women, mothers with babies are being detained. Something that you would not even do to your enemy is happening. The police is waiting right outside the hospital door to arrest a mother who has not given birth yet and is concerned for her own and her baby's health. Elderly who are over 70, 80 years old, blind, deaf people are being detained, get arrested.
LGBTİ bireylere cinsiyetçi, Kürtlere etnik, Alevilere inanç üzerinden saldırılar düzenleniyor. Bu insanlar hedef gösteriliyor, ırkçılık kabartılıyor, demokrasi ve insan hakları küçümseniyor, işçiler, emekçiler işten atılıyor ya da kölece çalışmaya zorlanıyorlar.
There are organized attacks targeting LGBT individuals sexually, against Kurdish people ethnically, against Alavis religiously. These people are shown as targets. Racism is boosted, democracy and human rights are underestimated. Workers, laborers are being fired or forced to work like slaves.
Bunların hepsi ülkemizde sömürü düzeni devam etsin, ekonomik kriz, kaos ortamıyla perdelensin, kapitalist tekeller zenginleşsin diye yapılıyor. KHK politikası da iktidarın bu amaçlarına hizmet ediyor. ülkeyi yasalarla yönetmek yerine AKP Genel Başkanı'nın imzası ile yasa yerine geçirilen kanun hükmünde kararnamelerle yönetmek istiyorlar.
These are taking place in our country so that this range of exploitation would continue. The economic crisis is covered up with the atmosphere of chaos. The capitalist sole traders would get richer. Decree laws are just serving right for the government's such interests. Instead of governing the country with the rule of law, they want to lead the state with the AKP's chairperson signing the decrees which are replacing the constitution.
Bunları size neden anlatıyorum? Birleşmiş Milletler, Avrupa İnsan Hakları Mahkemesi gibi kurumlardan hiçbir şey beklemiyorum. Yugoslavya'da Sırpların Yugoslavya'da Sırpların Boşnakları katletmesini izlemiş, Suriye'de IŞİD'in, Afganistan'da Taliban'ın katliamlarını seyretmiş, Birleşmiş Milletler Kurumu'ndan bir şey beklemiyorum. Başvurularımızı kabul etmeyeceklerini, ülkede OHAL komisyonu kurulup orada incelendikten sonra başvurumuzu kabul edeceğini söyleyerek AKP'nin KHK saldırısına ortak olan, bizi celladımızın önüne atan AHİM'den de bir şey beklemiyorum. Benim bu örgütlerde bir çözüm beklentim yok.
Why do I tell you all about this? I do not expect anything from institutions such as United Nations and the European Court of Human Rights. I do not expect anything from UN, who watched over Serbians killing Bosnians in Yugoslavia, ISIS in Syria, Taliban in Afghanistan. I do not expect anything from the European Court of Human Rights, which indicated that it will not accept our applications, set up a state of emergency commission, investigate the cases, and then process our complaints, by which they joined the AKP's assault of decree laws and leave us with our executioner.
Bu panele bizi izleyecek olan insanlarla internasyonel bir dayanışma kurabilmek adına katıldım. Dünya halkları olarak çözümün emperyalist örgütlerde değil, kendi ellerimizde olduğunu söylemek isterim. Ülkemizde de bu ırkçı, dinci, rantçı iktidardan ancak kendi mücadelelerimizle kurtulacağımızı biliyorum. Onurlu yüksel direnişçileri olarak dünyanın tüm emekçilerini, ezilenlerini saygıyla selamlıyorum. Biz haklıyız, biz kazanacağız.
I joined this panel looking forward to initiate an international support with the participants. I would like to say that the solution relies within us as world citizens, not in the imperialist organizations. I know that we will not only be freed of this racist, religious, profiteer government by our own struggle. As the Honorable Yüksel protesters, I greet the world's all working citizens oppressed with respect. We are rightful and we will win. Acun Hanım,
Yalnız
çok teşekkür ediyorum.
bir şey daha söylemek isterim. Milletvekilliği düşürülen Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu hem yüksel direnişinin hem de bütün hak mağduriyetlerinin yaşandığı her yerde yer almış ve bunun bedelini ödetmek isteyen iktidar tarafından vekillikten düşürülmüş biridir. Biz Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu'nun yanındayız ve hiçbir zaman yalnız bırakmayacağız. Çünkü o hiç kimseyi yalnız bırakmadı. Herkesin yanındaydı. Bunun için de iktidarı ve onun küçük ortağını protesto edeceğiz. Onu da söylemek isterim.
Evet. She also wanted to add that and mention about the MP Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu, whose seat was stripped yesterday in the parliament. She said that Gergerlioğlu has supported the Yüksel protesters and all the victims from all walks of lives since the beginning of this crisis. June is saying that they will not leave him alone. They are with him all through the way, and she also added that they will continue to continue their protests with the ruling party and their collaborators. Acun Hanım, tekrardan çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Ben teşekkür
Umarım
ederim.
sürçülisan etmemişimdir. Elimden geldiği kadarıyla yorum olmalarınızı çevirmeye gayret ettim. Soru cevap kısmında da herhangi bir feedbackiniz, farklı söylemek istediğiniz bir şey olursa yine translation'a devam edeceğim. Çok
Teşekkür ederim. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acun, once again for your remarks. And I see some questions already in the chat box, but we're going to come back to them at the very end of the session. So now we will be listening from Barbaros Şansal. He is a fashion designer and human rights activist. He studied business management at Marmara University and mastered in design at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. Throughout his career, he hosted TV programs. He is also the author of several books, including Printing Ink, Lives on Newsprint, and Fitting Room. Besides his successful career in fashion, Barbaros has been an outspoken critic of human rights violations in Turkey. He was very active in the Gezi Park protests in 2013. He was detained and threatened by police after criticizing their use of excessive force on TV. He was attacked many times as well because of his social media posts, and he raises awareness on minority and LGBT rights, gender-based violence in Turkey. Barbaros, it's a great pleasure to have you on board as well. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and be with us today. The floor is yours. If you can unmute yourself, you're still muted.
Mute. Okay, now it's okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. I've been listening to Acun, which is a friend of mine. Another case against me, prosecution I face is Nuriye Gülman, because I supported her and Semih while I was in Brussels, and they were just, one of the case against them was dropped, and I was so happy, and I just recorded a video cheering them. So another case arrived for me. Actually, at the moment, the situation in Turkey is not like a scene. First of all, by international communities, taxation, trade laws, and tax laws are above the constitutions. So in case of taking the attention on Turkish issue, we cannot expect many things from European Community Commissions or the Conseil or European Human Rights or United Nations, etc. For example, for European Human Rights Court, Turkey is participating with 25 million euro per year. So if you pay something, you won't get the result, which is, you will not like it. At the moment in Turkey, more than 700 women is in jail. Many, 700 women with babies are in jail, actually. 40,000 students, over 5,000 artists, over 20,000 soldiers. So many. The thing is, the issue is violence against women is the result of almost a century. Because in 1915, with the Armenian issue of the end of Ottoman era, it was getting rid of a minority. And then in 1920s, getting rid of Orthodox Greeks from Smyrna. And then 1930s, getting rid of Jew people from Gallipoli. And afterwards, in 1955, there was a big meeting in Taksim and the second invasion on Orthodox citizens of Istanbul. And then 1974, Cyprus, and 1980, military coup. And then we see burned out hotels with Alevita and et cetera, though systematically. The Turkish government's, the mentality of the state is getting rid of the minorities, creating a nation with one language, one flag, one religion, but one gender is not possible. So in the end, after 80s, up to 80s, Turkish woman was in the secular part of the government and secular part of the population who lives in the big cities, actually, after the Republic Revolution, were too much into the education, into the business, into the art, everywhere. But Anatolia, which is the countryside, was not like this. Women were mostly uneducated and working in farms and being mother model, so and so. But after 1980 revolution, It doesn't matter it's Islam or secular, whatever. The woman started to take her own role, because the political parties needed much more votes. For that, they need to deal with women. So once women start to go into the politics as a supporter teams, they were on the streets. Once the woman went on the street, they see the real life and started to ask more about their own rights. Actually, the breaking point was this in Turkey. With the AKP regime, Erdogan's regime, which almost 19 years ago it started, women was one of the biggest supporters of the system, because 28th of February thing that woman first forced to get rid of the headscarf. They were against the Islam, etc. But in the end, once women were out on the street, they were in the politics, they were in everywhere, doesn't matter secular or Muslim philosophy. But 2015, which regime calls in the beginning uprising, this coup attempt, which I don't believe this. Next day, we saw in Istanbul all the traffic signs, including the name of the Bosphorus Bridge, was replaced with the new names. So we can understand something was prepared. It was not uprising or the coup attempt, it was prepared systematic staging. We saw the military persons beheaded on the bridge. We saw so many women, children, teachers, sportists, artists, scholars, academics, scientific men, much more taken into the custody, prosecution, and put in a jail. For a long time, I faced all those revolutions. I had to face exile in 1980, military revolution, 9 years, etc. But the thing is, in the end, once, it was 2015 actually, or 2016, pardon. One night I criticized the Turkish regime with the arrested journalists, this fundamental radical Islamic promotion, playing with other countries' interior ministries, changing the time zones, pushing the cultural invasions, etc. I have been illegally, with an international organized crime, I have been illegally picked up from north of Cyprus and almost faced a lynch mob in an international airport front of the live transmitting cameras and put in a jail, cell jail in Silivri Dungeons, which is one of the most high security jail of Europe. In that jail, in my cell, nights were alone and silent, but you can hear the guys who was in charge of the security are putting pins into the woman's nipples, the torture. You can see breaking bones. You can see insultant. You can hear all of this, actually. You cannot see, but you can hear all of this until the daylight comes out. You cannot see the sun. You can feel the daylight. And this systematic torture, this autocracy, and this fascism movement of the government, in the end, it started to target the woman because there was no enemy left. There was no Armenian left. There were no communists left. There were no Alevi left. One by one, they believe they get rid of everything. And to create a new enemy, this time it was a woman. Women, if they are pregnant, cannot go to street, they said. Woman cannot laugh with a high voice on the street, they said. Woman has to be a mother of the house, they said. Woman is a piece of man, they said. But in the political regimes, they've always promoted with women. like any other groups who comes close to the AKP, Erdogan's regime government, in the end face the brutality, face the judgment, and face the jail or exile. So many examples, I can give you more about this. And also in last 20 years, the education system of the secular modern Turkish Republic has been transformed totally, almost into the religious education system, division with the girls and boys, and also academics who flown out of the country, especially after the military coup attempt, which is uprising. They've been all left the country. Now, I give you some numbers. In 2018, 150,000 Turkish citizens flew out of the country. 2019, 250,000 more citizens flew out the country. 2020, 450,000 more students, citizens, artists flew out the country, including me. And now we are calculating 2021 will almost 1 million citizens will flow out the country. So it's not a brain drain, it's a brain bleeding and brain strike. At the moment, international organizations, NGOs, civil rights defenders, which I contact with Amnesty Belgium, London, Germany, etc., they cannot do much of things. As I said in the beginning of my conversation, international agreements on taxation, trade, and gun sales, pharmacology and chemical monopolies, technology transfers, know-hows, financial banking systems, etc., which is win-win. I don't think this kind of societies will be very helpful on the Turkish issue. How we can solve the problem of the Turkish government's this very tough and wild and unlawful behavior, I think the best way is civil uprising. I mean, to stop the life. Don't work, don't go to work, don't use the electricity, do something, harm them economically, because the Turkish government's soft tummy is only the economy. They are not believing God, they are believing in money and power. So I thank you very much for giving me a chance to explain my point of view for that. I'm not hopeless because this is not the first time I see what's going on in Turkey. I was very young when 1962 Adnan Menderes was hanged. He was a guest in our house because of my family occupation and professions, but my family didn't tell a word and didn't defend him when he was judged and hanged to death. And in 1980 revolution, I faced the same thing from my nearby local people. They don't care. In all of the issues and sections we sue, they support you, but when you look your back, there is no one there. I think the best way at the moment is, first of all, creating an international attention what's going on in Turkey. Secondly, slow down the economy of Turkey, because Turks cannot live without this edict of being power and money. And third, rebuild the new constitution, which full of democracy and human rights, also environment. The most and other important issues, LGBTI issue, as a supporter of one of them and leading the movement approximately 20 years in Turkey. Even the head of the government says there is no LGBT people in Turkey in the past, like Chechnya, like Afghanistan. Turkey is not, Turkey doesn't belong to the radical Islamic, it's a Sunni base, but not Halafi, not Salafi. Turkey's character and people's creation cannot absorb this kind of radical winds. That's why I have a hope the people of Turkey will change the situation, because I'm sure the AKP regime and MHP, which is a small partner of the group, is expired as a shelf date. Turkey will be again back into its deserved position in international community. But another thing is, the Western democracies relies on statistics and communications of officials, which most of the countries are big liars on that. They don't give the right numbers, right statistics, and most of them are not right people in right positions, actually, including the European Parliament. Article 19 is very important. Catalonia issue will be an example to Turkey soon with HDP issue. Don't be hopeless, be hope, stop the tortures, stop violating human rights, stop violating women and LGBT people, stop violating animals, stop harming the environment. Just express your feelings internationally to whoever you can reach, because person-to-person relations can create much more effect, like a butterfly effect, than this many official groups or organizations or companies. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to express myself live in this platform. Normally I'm censored and banned all over the Turkey. Now I live abroad for certain reasons. And there are many cases against me, including insulting Turkish nation, insulting Turkish president, and etc. So carry on and stay alive. Thank you.
Marvelous. Thank you so much for rising our hopes up as well. I think the solidarity with your leadership, with Acun's examples, is strengthening every day. I see that really. I'm hopeful too, as the opposition has started to spread through all levels of society. You also mentioned they even came to a point where they found no one to sweep away but women. So we are at that very critical point, and I thank you for your substantial, concrete solutions, proposals as well, and really appreciate the brief background on the history of Turkish democracy as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our last speaker, we will hear from Hafsa Girdap. She does her PhD in Women's and Gender Studies at Stony Brook University. Her research area is human and women's rights in Muslim contexts, integration and adoption of Muslim immigrant women, along with the issue of redefinition of their cultural identities. She is also a founding member of Set Them Free and a volunteer in different human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. She has given Sufism and women's rights are human rights courses at Emory University. She has also given speeches at several conferences such as UNGA, CSW, and World Affairs Council peace conferences about what's going on in Turkey at this moment, mainly focusing on women's experiences and forced migration. Hafsa, I believe we're going to hear from you on the context of this conflict and being a woman in this atmosphere of fear. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cemre. Hope you can hear me. Yeah, great. So first of all, I'm very happy and honored to be here with you with such an amazing team. It was really informative. I mean, all the presentations. Thank you guys for being that outspoken. Let me start by saying that I was a teacher, a proud colleague of Ms. Acun, and an international programs coordinator back in Turkey, and have been living in the United States since July 2016, which means that I left Turkey because of the political conflict. As an activist working in human rights, specifically women's rights organizations and platforms, and also as a scholar concentrating on immigrant women's experiences and empowerment, today I will touch on the issue of being a woman in the context of conflicts, with a particular focus on violence against women in Turkey, and standing up again after all, and ultimately the concept of empowerment of women standing in solidarity. Speaking of solidarity, I would like to mention Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu, who has been a relentless, tireless human rights defender, fighting for the rights of all people, regardless of their identities. Regrettably, his immunity yesterday has just been lifted by stripping his parliamentary seat. And I want to say that I'm standing in full solidarity with him. Let me move on with today's topic. Women's issues and women's rights have always been controversial in terms of their dynamics in specific contexts, as well as in the universal arena. The political actors claim sovereign power and legitimacy for this power through many different discourses, while making claims for human and women's rights. Language initially and significantly plays a huge role in legitimizing violence and increasing violence against women. And furthermore, state policies, political agendas tend to control women and issues related to women. What is worse, there is the matter of great impunity in Turkey when it comes to the state-led violence and sexual harassments. Increased violence against women during and after conflicts is very obvious. Women are disproportionately targeted in contemporary armed conflicts, as just stated by Kofi Annan. In other words, the most vulnerable victims of wars and conflicts are women. They are used as proxies, assaulted, oppressed, and discriminated. When it comes to Turkey, a reality of cruel violations of women's basic rights is encountered widely. Ms. Karadağ told first-hand experiences about such these violations and grave violence, which is horrifying. Unfortunately, women's rights have never been truly enjoyed in Turkey. They have always been subjugated, discriminated, and oppressed by the social, institutional, and structural actors predominantly. The laws are not properly implemented to protect women or to recognize their rights. We heard Holly reading true experiences of Kurdish women, particularly since July 15, 2016, Turkey's already deteriorating democratic instruments have started to fall apart because of the government's authorities' collective persecution of all political dissidents and critics. And at this point, we also heard Ms. Karadağ that how huge the purge was. More than 130,000 people were dismissed from their jobs by emergency decrees. And those dismissed include a substantial number of women. And moreover, the government's harsh persecution has reached the lives of thousands of women, along with their infants, their children in many cases. The current administration, the regime, uses arbitrary arrests and lengthy pretrial detentions to imprison courageous women who have opposed oppression in their own capacity. I hate to declare these cases with numbers, but facts are facts, and they are so important. The number of women arbitrarily incarcerated as political prisoners is more than 5,000, with a devastating increase in the number of new victims. And among those persecuted are more than 700 mothers who have been imprisoned with their infants. Furthermore, discrimination and violence against women, including femicide, have risen drastically. Just alone in 2020, 300 women were killed. There's a platform in Turkey, We Will Stop Femicide organization. They stated in their 2020 report that that year, the last year, ended with an extraordinary period that with the prevalent coronavirus pandemic across the world and Turkey, on top of all aforesaid political conflict, which is extremely impactful on women, domestic violence has desperately increased. Furthermore, Turkey's government, or I should say Turkey's staggering authoritarian regime, let the conflicting atmosphere and misogynists and opponents of equality open up the Istanbul Convention for discussion through a so-called religious discourse. And the attacks to the convention have increased again according to the We Will Stop Femicide report. Here I want to point out to something vital. Eren Keskin, the co-chair of Human Rights Association, once mentioned that although intense violence against women is the case, until 2005, violence against women was not even a chapter title in the Turkish Penal Code. The title of the section regulating violence against women in the law was General Morality and Crimes Against Family. So woman was just an element of morality and family. She also highlighted that in 2005, because of the struggle of women and the wins of the European Union at that time, the law was amended and the violence against women came into law with the title sexual assault crimes. However, even if the written law has changed, it cannot be said that there has been a major change in mindsets, in practice and understandings. That is to say, the mindsets, language, discourses are of high importance, considering the actions and also the implementation of laws. Now, I would like to shed a light on what can be done part. Being aware of most significant barriers of challenges, prioritizing actions and following a process accordingly is a very important and initial step to proceed in terms of motivating, empowering women, as well as recognizing and enjoying the rise. And in this sense, we need to urge the leaders, just as Ms. Karadağ mentioned, we need to urge the leaders, the decision makers from the lowest level to the highest. We could and should urge our fathers, our community leaders, our religious leaders, managers, directors in businesses, politicians in office to ensure that women's rights are respected and preserved. Moreover, that they are not discriminated. We should also make sure that the perpetrators of violence are brought into justice, no matter what it takes. I want to emphasize that women who are exposed to violence, physically, sexually, financially, psychologically, should be encouraged to speak out. And most important part, we can and must do this by breaking prejudices over and organizing solidarity. As far as I observe within both my activism and academic work, the basic need is that there should be only one point in our minds while mobilizing in such an important matter. It's only our common ground combating violence against women, violence against equality, gender equality. Fight against violence, fight against inequality, fight against injustice. If we do this in unity, solidarity and political unity, then the strength we have will rise up. Polarization divides us and eventually creates so many different camps, and this ultimately makes us weak. My closing remarks would be that violence against women is political. Defending women's rights is not just opposing the crushing relationship between men and women. No, it's not that. It's also to oppose structural, institutional, social discrimination, violence, and injustice. First and foremost, we have to speak up. And then solidarity and support are among the keywords that I have learned so far, both as a woman, as an activist, as a scholar working in this field. And it's not a fight to win alone, but by increasingly coming together. At this point, diversity is beautiful. As Kurdish, as secular or pious, as Alevis, as Armenians, as left-wing or right-wing. All together, we have to speak up, stand up. Let me finish with a well-known cliche: united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Hafsa, for your strong presentation, and I know of your tireless contributions to this claim. So I appreciate you all the time. So thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you. We are a limited crowd in Zoom, but I see that participation is way higher in YouTube. We are having pouring comments and feedbacks. I think everyone is really moved by the speeches, and I'm gonna read some of the comments here, but I have one important question that I would like to start with this question, and maybe I can ask every panelist what they think about this, because it's an important action that they ask for. Barbaros kind of touched upon it, but maybe he will have some more items to cover. So Marion Boker is asking and saying also that so heartbreaking to hear all this. I worked many times with partners, women NGOs in Turkey, and with Kurdish women and municipalities. Hope this ends. It should be in the hands of the voter. And a question, what can we do to support? And Aisha Arun from UK has also a similar question. What can those of us outside Turkey do to assess the case of human rights? And I would like to start with Holly, because I know that you investigate such crises in other countries as well, not only in Turkey. And I believe the solution should be the same. I mean, same set of approaches that civil actors can take should apply in every country's situation on the basic level. So Holly, what would you advise? How could we combat such acts, such crises? And please unmute yourself first.
I mean, for me, the approach that I would take in journalism that I try to, I guess, convey is I feel that my role is to be something of a vessel for people. And I don't use the word voice because everybody has a voice. It's just a point of how we can get those voices heard. And so I think from my lens as a journalist, I don't want to recommend certain places or other places to donate money. I really just believe in people educating themselves. I believe in people supporting world news, because I think the media is a little bit in crisis now, especially in the United States, where we tend to be very insular. And this idea where I think a lot of sort of news directors tend to think that American audience don't want to hear about world news. They don't want to hear about what's happening in other places. And I found that to be quite untrue in many ways. I think when you can present and you can get the information to audiences, they will read it and they will understand it. So for me, from my point of view, is really just support world news, support really educating yourself in these issues and kind of stand up for what journalism is supposed to be. And then I guess once you have all that information, decide the best course of action from there. But I will defer to my fellow panelists to give you a little bit more concrete info on that.
Hafsa, you wanna take the lead by answering that while I look back at the other comments and feedbacks? Do you have anything to add on for this question? What can we do to support outside of Turkey especially?
I mean, in my personal experience, I feel that I'm safe and I'm secure, I'm free. So I feel with solidarity with other women's platforms or equality platforms, gender equality platforms, we should come together in solidarity and raise our voices up. And I saw a question there. I don't understand if you wanna answer that question specifically, or I was thinking to speak about the polarization and how to deal with this polarization idea.
I would appreciate a couple of your feedbacks on both sides. I have many other comments here that I wanna cover as well. Maybe short
Okay.
I would appreciate.
So that's a good question, because it's the biggest problem, I guess. There are different sects in Turkey, as I mentioned, different religious ideas or ideologies or different ethnicities. So we have to put all this conflict of ideas aside while combating violence against women, violence against gender inequality. And I don't mean put the differences aside. Vice versa, if we can embrace each other, accepting and recognizing our differences, then that will make a sense. Well, if we could do that in solidarity, recognizing the differences, then we will see that there is just only one common ground that we have to fight a authoritarian and oppressing regime, and then us, regime and us. So we have to stand in solidarity. That's the only way.
Yes, thank you. Ajun Hanım, sizin bu konuda eklemek istediğiniz bir şeyler olur mu? Bir sorumuz vardı. Özellikle yurt dışında yaşayan insanlar olarak Türkiye'deki bu hadiselere, insan hakları ihlallerine, bu mücadeleye destek vermek için neler yapabiliriz dışarıdan? Böyle bir soru vardı. Bir şeyler eklemek ister misiniz? Mikrofonunuzu açabilirseniz memnun olurum. Evet, şimdi duyabiliyorum.
Her ülkenin yöneticilerinin demokrasi içinde halkın oyuna ihtiyacı var. Dolayısıyla halkın oyu olmadan hiçbir iktidar, hiçbir parti iktidara gelemez ve yönetemez. Dolayısıyla bütün dünyadaki halkların halkları yönetenlerin onlara ihtiyacı var. Dolayısıyla yurt dışındaki insanlar da yöneticilerini de etkileyecek eylemlerde, protestolarda bulunabilirlerse, yani orada bir güç oluşturabilirlerse ancak burayı etkileyebilirler. Hani konuşmamda da söylediğim gibi ancak halklar bir arada durabilirse ve yönetime karşı bir şey yapabilirlerse etkili olabilirler. Dolayısıyla örnek veriyorum, Amerikan başkanının bir şey yapabilmesi için Amerikan halkının o iktidara yönelik, yöneticiye yönelik bir şey yapması gerekir. Bir protesto eylemi ya da bir arada olmak. Yani şunu anlamalı dünyadaki yöneticiler. Biz halklarımız ne istiyorsa onu yapmalıyız. Yoksa bize hayat hakkı yok. Yani iktidar hakkı yok. Onun için de yurt dışındaki insanların emekten yana ve ezilenlerden yana insanların bir araya gelip o iktidarlara karşı bir şey söylemesi gerekir. Böyle olabileceğini düşünüyorum. O da tabii şeylerle olur. Demokratik kitle örgütleriyle olur. Onu bir araya gelirse bir şey yapabilirler diye düşünüyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Ben teşekkür ederim. As a very quick summary, she said we have to function the democracy with our own votes for democratic leaders and parties to function in the manner of rule of law. And every party, she underlines, needs their communities to support them with their votes. So citizens living abroad can initiate movements, solidarity projects to stand with us that will abide our own local government here, the international pressure that they will push forward from any other foreign country would be appreciated, she thinks. And giving an example from the US side, she says if people living in the US would only raises these human rights violations into the agendas of the ruling parties, then she says maybe the US president would be more proactive to take an action and really make an influence on Turkey in democratic ways as well. Thank you so much. Barbaros, would you like to add any other things to this question, specifically asking what we can do outside of Turkey to assist? You might be muted, or we may have a connection problem, I'm not sure. Let me keep up. I think he is not present at the moment. If you come back, Barbaros, please jump into the conversation. I have some comments from audience that I would like to read out as well. Vasily K. Demos says, thank you for a very informative presentation. The panelists make it clear that it is also important to speak up, to summon the courage to do so. Uroj Mian from Canada says, I want to thank you. We hear you. Your voice is permeating borders. Keep speaking, demanding it will not fall on deaf ears. Solidarity from Canada. Sadece Türkiye değil, başka ülkelerden de güzel komentler alıyoruz. Kanada'dan güzel bir destek mesajı okumuş oldum. Mary Scott, the political representative from opposition party, I think this is also answered in the question as well. The member of parliament, Ömer Faruk Gergerlioğlu, she's asking about. Nur Yaz, teşekkürler Acun Hanım. Senelerdir zihnimize kazınmış bazı kalıplar vardı ve bizim kendimizi aşmamız kolay olmuyor. Siz bize şiddetsiz direnişi uygulamalı olarak öğretiyorsunuz. Teşekkürler. Sadri Altınok, hats off to organizers and the distinguished panelists for telling it as it is clear as possible. What is really happening in Turkey, especially women and children, a human tragedy. Thank you, Sadri. Elif says, yes, they worship money and power. Thank you, Barbaros. So many cheer outs for Acun Hanım. Nihal Koç says, Acun Hanım, you're an inspiration. Herkesi çok güzel bir şekilde motive etmiş oldunuz. I see the comment of Bülent Kaya. We are thankful for all speakers who participated today and shared their solidarity. Once again, for Barbaros Şansal, thank you for being so hopeful still and believing in solidarity of people. Mesut Ülker, Türkiye'deki kadınların sesi ve vicdanı olan Acun Hanım'a sonsuz saygı hürmetlerimizi iletiyorum. Bilmenizi isterim ki biz vicdanlarını kaybetmemiş canlar olarak onu hiçbir zaman yalnız bırakmayacağız. Some comments from Holly as well. Esra says, thank you so much for your presentation today and informed us about what happened in Turkey with real stories and of course some other Turkish, Kurdish women's stories as well. And once again, her book, she refers only cry for the living. I see many more comments, but they are pretty much on the same line. Maybe one last question from Mehmet Klik that I can refer to asking Holly. Thank you for covering the human rights issues in Turkey and the stories of women who face discrimination and violence. He's asking if you have experienced any threats for your journalism on Turkey.
No, I haven't. And I always definitely take an approach where I try to be as fair to give each side that's implicated into a story a chance to present their side. So I've always gone to Turkish officials or, ask someone at the embassy for comment on certain specifics, and will either give their point of view or they won't. But I have found my dealings with them to be all fairly polite, and I haven't received any threats, at least from an official level.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, and this is the way it should be. Everyone should have a free access to any sort of investigation, especially you're doing your job, giving both sides a same credibility for their own presentation of their views. Thank you so much for the credible work as well. Maybe last comment I see is from Kristen saying, thank you so much for your courage and sharing your struggle with all of us. As I said, there are many more comments, but I don't want to take much of your time. We are almost over with our panel discussion. Holly, Acun, Barbaros, Hafsa, thank you so much. It's a very important occasion. We were here today discussing about the violence of all forms. It's not only physical violence. Women are going through psychological, economic violence as well, especially in Turkey, all around the world as well. But today we focused on Turkey. And I want to say that we really appreciate your struggles, your all the advocacy work that you do in Turkey. Acun Hanım, özellikle size tekrardan çok teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Yorumların çoğu size geldi. Müsait vaktinizde belki YouTube'da kalırsa siz de tekrar dönüp okuyabilirsiniz. Herkes sizlere çok özel teşekkürlerini iletiyorlar. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Davetimizi kabul ettiniz. Bugün bizimle bulundunuz. Ağzınıza sağlık. And thank you so much for our audience for being very active, sharing their comments, questions. This was an event that we organized on the occasion of United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. It is very important to indicate what's going on in Turkey and outside Turkey as well. We have to stand in solidarity to combat all forms of violence against women. And just as last comment, maybe I want to say women's rights, women's empowerment is never an issue that abides women only. Please, this is a very important aspect. Development needs all stakeholders of society to gather along to support women, girls, ethnic minorities, LGBT members, and everyone. So let's stand in solidarity, I'm going to say, by closing our discussion. Thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to see everyone again in different occasions.